and welcome back to Book and Page. So, Chapter 3 of The Hobbit. Let's do a quick summary, and then we'll get to some talking points. So, we have Bilbo and the others seeking the Valley of Rivendell. And Bilbo sees mountains for the first time, and says, is that the mountain? The answer is no, that is not yet the mountain. We have the rest of the book to get through first. Well, not quite. So they find the valley, and hear some ribbing in musical form from some very merry elves. The group stay at Rivendell under Lord Elrond, and recover and resupply. And along with that, Elrond reads the moon ruins off the map so that we actually know there is a way into the mountain. The door opens with the last light of Durin's Day. So that's our plan. And then they leave the valley. So we've had a nice rest, which is necessarily important after the first big fight that they've had. And the last homely house is always a lovely place to be. So there are a few things in this chapter. It's a shorter chapter. It's not as big on the action because it is specifically that break that is necessary, and we'll get a few more of those as we go through. But there are some questions that sort of need considering. One, why is the last homely house so hidden? It's apparently this great place and very welcoming. Dwarves can come in, hobbits can come in, Gandalf can come in, I'm assuming men can come in. So why does Gandalf have trouble finding it? Like he says, like we have to be really careful looking for this road or we'll miss it completely. Well, I suppose the easy answer to that is that it's a safety concern. We've got to hide the last homely house to make it safe for all of us so that it can be this really powerful place of resting and recuperation. But there seems to be something else there because, well, if it's so hidden, how do the people that really need it find it? Well, part of it might be that they have some help. Like, there's going to be people that know where it is, and the news of it spreads around, and, like, the dwarves have Gandalf to help, and maybe elves come out. In Lord of the Rings, it's, I should know his name. In the movies, they use Arwen, but it is not Arwen in the books. It is another elf who is actually a Balrog Slayer. I can remember his title. I can't remember his name right now. The idea that you need guides. It is this safe and healthy place that you need to be guided to. You can't just find it on your own. Maybe it's that idea that you need to be willing to ask for help if her help is offered to you, which is really interesting. Especially when they play up in the movies of, we don't want it, and then they just, Gandalf makes them accidentally stumble on it. No, seems to be more the idea that you ask for help, help is given, and you find the last homely house, and you can rest there. And it's sort of an interesting type of rest, because it specifically says, well, if you need to sit and think, or you need to sing, or you need to work, all of those, Rivendell's the best place to do it. But it's sort of weird with this hidden nature to it that it's still not completely safe. Because they're going past all these singing elves, and the elves are calling out, like, Bilbo should lay off some of the snacks because he's not fitting through any keyholes yet. Like, the elves sort of give hints that they know what's going on. And Gandalf says, okay, we need to hurry up because valleys have ears, and some elves have too merry tongues. Some elves say too much. So, what's in the valley that is bad? What is in this hidden valley that the good guys had difficulty finding, that they still need to protect themselves from? It's this weird little hint that even this valley isn't fully safe. And you need to be careful, like, what you speak about and who you speak to. which is interesting because you'd think Rivendell, well, it's the safest place, right? Not quite. And I'm never quite sure we get answers to what's listening in the valley. But it's one of those things where the underlying danger is still there. Even in this restful moment, you can't stop here because there's always going to be something else that gets you started. And it might be whatever's listening in the valley. I suppose the next big question is, what is with the characterization of these elves? Why are these elves so merry? What is going on with these elves? Because it doesn't quite seem to fit. It doesn't fit with another set of elves that we're going to meet in The Hobbit itself, which is the Mirkwood elves. And it doesn't quite seem to fit Tolkien's characterization of elves overall. Through his other books, in his Lord of the Rings, we meet the Rivendell elves again, and we get songs from them, but not these nonsense songs that we're getting at this point. And so, what's happened? Why do we have this silly little merry song with some gentle ribbing in it, rather than the stark, serious elves that we're used to past this point? Because it does seem weird. It does seem like this is a random little thing that maybe Tolkien didn't have his idea of elves figured out yet. But the thing to keep in mind, of course, is that the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, the Silmarillion, all of the books that ended up getting published are part of this grand world that Tolkien had in his head. So to say that this characterization of the elves is one of the earlier ones is hard to make the argument for, because he wrote extensively, and The Hobbit just was the first thing that got published because it was a children's book. So it's a little easier to publish a fairy story than any full, dense piece. If anyone's read the Silmarillion, you are going through layers of difficulty. So The Hobbit is by far the easiest to read. Lord of the Rings gets more difficult. A lot of people say, can't read Lord of the Rings, just so much description, just really dense. Silmarillion's even worse than that. And then his collection of the Lost Tales, the Untold Tales, it gets very murky because it's just so extensive and he's trying to get it all down. So we can't say, well, this is just his first version of it, and they changed from there. There is something canon about this portrayal of the elves that has to be considered. So part of it, I get the feeling, is that, well, they're allowed to be merry at this point in time and have a little nonsense. We're not full war mode that we're going to see in Lord of the Rings. So this is a place that you can come and be merry and relax and be safe within that type of emotion. And I think with elves it's particularly important because these are immortal beings, or at least really long-lived beings. So when you have a life like that, and you've been through multiple wars and strife and issues, that's really damaging if you're just so focused on how wrong everything is and how bad everything is. That can really pull you down. And in fact, a lot of elves within canon that do run into issues like that end up sailing west. They leave. That's what happens to Elrond's wife. She goes through a really horrible thing with orcs, and is suffering because of it. So she goes to the west. So I think the elves have sort of figured out that they need to be open and allow for just joyful happiness and silly happiness every once in a while, and not be completely serious, because it starts to have an effect on you. And in fact, I think we see that issue with the Mirkwood elves later, when they're taking themselves too seriously and thus are much more closed off to helping people and showing kindness than the Rivendell elves are. Rivendell elves are willing to laugh at themselves and each other and other people. And that's something that's necessary at this point, because they're getting bogged down and they have to avoid that. They have to bring themselves back up. So a little nonsense is important, and Rivendell needs to be open to that. So it's good to see that the elves aren't just saying that to everybody else and then being super serious themselves. They can be silly and funny and enjoy themselves. And it means something, because Bilbo says that he knows he needs to go and get rest and eat, but he wants to stay and listen to these elves. So there's something important for everybody else as well in that silliness and expressing that silliness and merriment. So that's actually really cool and not overly stated. And then the last interesting thing is got to be the idea of shared secrets. Because we've established that Rivendell is hidden. It's a hidden valley, and it seems that you already sort of have to know it's there or have a guide that knows it's there to be able to get there safely. But it's not closed off. That is a secret that people are willing to share. You've got guides that are willing to bring you in, and the elves are willing to welcome you. And the later end of the chapter really sort of picks this up with this shared relationship between the elves and the dwarves, who they have some animosity within Middle-earth. But we also have this weird share of secrets between them, where we've got the Hidden Valley being shared as a secret. And the next one that comes up is actually the swords. So both Gandalf and Thorin have these swords that it turns out are elven made. And they show them to Elrond, so they're not trying to hoard these things for themselves. They willingly show them to Elrond, and Elrond willingly tells them the history of the swords, and how they're old Gondolin swords. So this is history to the elves, and important ones. They're known swords, they belong to important people. But Elrond not only shares his history, but shares the sword itself. There is no question from Elrond of returning the swords to the elven people. It is an accepted thing that both, not only Gandalf, who is sort of a better friend than maybe somebody like Thorin, but Thorin too is allowed to keep his elven-made sword, and takes it willingly, and takes the history with it, and the name with it. His is Goblin Cleaver, and he says he'd be honored to have this sword with this history, and trusts that it will cleave goblins again. It's not this complete animosity between the groups. It's in fact a shared history and stories and secrets going between them. That is this open communication that is actually bridging gaps. We share our homes, we share our weapons, and then we also share our stories and our writing. Because that's what the moon ruins are. They show the map to Elrond. Again, another shared secret. Because it's too obvious then that they're going to the Lonely Mountain. But the dwarves are willing to share that with Elrond in hopes of getting some more information. And Elrond doesn't stop them. It is noted that he thinks that dwarves can be too greedy, but he doesn't make the decision that it's his decision to stop them or not. The dragon does have to be stopped, and if the dwarves are willing to do that, then that's a good thing. So they willingly share this map with Elrond, and Elrond looks at it and finds moon ruins on it. And he says that the moon ruins were a created hidden language by the dwarves. But it's not any dwarves that are looking for the moon ruins, it's Elrond. So we have a history of shared secrets here, because the dwarves have created this secret language that has been shared with elves, or at least Elrond, who has retained this history when apparently the dwarves have not, and then, again, willingly shares it back. He explains, well, it's a dwarven language, it was written with silver pens, and the trickier ruins can only be seen with the same type of moon that they were written with. Like, that's a good deal of information he didn't need to share. He could have kept that secret. But he recognizes this is open communication. This is actually a really positive experience involving not only the dwarves and the elves, but Bilbo now, as a hobbit, is here. And notably, he's included. He asks questions, and he's not ignored. He's not told to leave. he's there, and so is Gandalf. It's this lovely exchange of information that was once secret, but has been shared now, and it's almost as if you're included in the secret, with the idea that you can share it when necessary. So it's a much more positive relationship on a whole in this chapter, going from the inability for the dwarves and Bilbo and Gandalf to communicate among themselves, to them learning their lesson and communicating among themselves to get to the Hidden Valley, and among them and the elves as well. So it's this beautiful relationship we're actually seeing in quiet moments of shared information and shared secrets. It's a really nice chapter, and I often find it's underrated, because it's just, well, we're just here for a break, and we're moving on. But there are bits and pieces you can certainly pull out, and threads you can pick at. So, I always love that. Okay, I think I've been talking enough, so I'm going to keep reading, and I hope you do too. See you next time.